Welcome back to the shadows, lost souls. Tonight, Beyond the Clue will take you back to a bygone era, to the heart of a bustling metropolis in America, where beneath the glamour of 1956 lay a dark secret, a sinister presence spreading unspeakable terror. The story I am about to tell, like a dried blood stain on an old diary page, will reveal the rise of a bloodthirsty phantom, one who transformed charm into a curse and every full moon into a symphony of death. The city of New Shadow Creek, 1956. Neon lights shimmered down bustling streets. The mellow sound of jazz drifted from nightclubs, and the scent of gasoline mingled with heady perfume. But behind that vibrant facade, an invisible fear was spreading. In recent weeks, the city had been shaken by a series of mysterious disappearances and tragic, unexplained deaths. The victims, seemingly unconnected, were all found drained of blood, with 2 ghastly sharp bite marks on their necks, the hallmark of a predator thought to exist only in ancient books and the worst nightmares. In the shadows of the narrow, unlit alleys, where light could not reach, he lurked. Elias Thorne, a name not found in any modern identification records, yet it echoed like a reverberation from ancient spires in a distant land. With the refined appearance of a European gentleman, deep eyes holding centuries of secrets, and a hauntingly charming smile, Elias easily blended into the flow of New Shadow Creek. He was the embodiment of the night, a supreme predator cloaked in the alluring guise of a lonely wanderer. The luxurious nightclubs, where liquor flowed like water and wild dances concealed countless empty souls, became Elias's preferred hunting grounds. He sought potential prey in the intoxicated crowds, his gaze scrutinizing like a black panther stalking in the night. His victims were not only lonely individuals, but sometimes also passionate lovers, powerful men smug with their wealth, and even young girls dreaming of a bright future. All became a bloody feast under Elias Thorne's sharp fangs. Detective Jack Rourke, a tough middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and dark circles under his eyes from sleepless nights, was tasked with unraveling this horrifying string of crimes. Jack was a realist, relying on evidence and logic to draw conclusions. Initially, he suspected a brutal serial killer, a deranged psychopath. But the deeper he investigated, the stranger the details became. No signs of forced entry, no struggle, and most frighteningly, the inexplicable amount of blood missing from the victims' bodies. Rumors began to spread in the city's dark corners. People whispered of a bloodthirsty demon, a mythical creature risen from ancient tales. Some even recalled legends of vampires, night phantoms craving human blood. Jack Rourke dismissed all such notions. He believed in the real world, in flesh and blood criminals. But deep in his mind, a strange unease continued to burn, a feeling that he was confronting something far beyond his comprehension. On a rain-drenched night, a young woman named Eliza Hayes, an ambitious reporter for the local newspaper, coincidentally met Elias Thorne in a secluded bar on the outskirts. Elias's mysterious charm immediately captivated Eliza. They talked all night, sharing dreams and unspoken loneliness. Eliza had no idea that the charming man sitting across from her was the nightmare currently terrorizing the city, and this fateful encounter would pull her into a dangerous vortex where the line between life and death became more fragile than ever. Ladies and gentlemen, 18 years ago, on the full moon night of January 2004, the usually peaceful town of Willow Creek in Evergreen County, Washington State, was suddenly shaken by the death of 3 family members. This tragic case instilled great fear among the residents. The 3 victims were brutally murdered by a perpetrator who left no trace. No witnesses knew what happened to the unfortunate victims. Who brutally murdered this entire family on that full moon night of January? And what mysterious secrets lie behind this case? That will be the content of today's Case File program. At 7:30 p.m. on the 6th of February, 2004, the telephone at the Willow Creek Police Department's watch desk, Evergreen County, Washington State, rang incessantly. The frantic voice on the other end reported that residents Arthur Coleman, his wife Martha Coleman, and their daughter Sarah Coleman were found dead in their home with multiple injuries. Upon receiving the report, the Willow Creek Police Department immediately dispatched personnel to secure the scene and quickly reported to higher authorities. Investigation forces immediately arrived at the scene to examine and prepare for forensic examination. At the time of the incident, it was during the Lunar New Year's Full Moon Festival, a very busy period in that area. Therefore, securing the scene, conducting the autopsy, and collecting evidence were carried out very meticulously. All 3 victims were determined to have died 12 to 15 hours before the autopsy. The scene was the home of Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, a house located in a densely populated neighborhood. However, what was astonishing was that on the night of the incident, no one knew anything until the construction contractor discovered it. Initial investigation results showed that all 3 victims were murdered by the perpetrator using blunt force. Multiple wounds on their bodies and bloodstains throughout the scene indicated the perpetrator's cold and cruel nature. The Special Investigation Unit dispatched experienced officers from various teams to participate in the scene examination and evidence collection. Through the scene examination, we discovered shoe prints, bare footprints, and bloodstains on the bodies. The bodies of Mr. Arthur Coleman, born 1943, Mrs. Martha Coleman, born 1950, and their daughter Sarah Coleman, born 1976, were found dead at the scene. Mr. Coleman was found dead on the staircase, Mrs. Coleman in the bedroom, and Sarah in the bathroom. Through the scene examination and autopsy, we collected various trace evidences and evidence at the scene and on the bodies, leading us to conclude that there was a high probability the perpetrator was an individual who committed the crime for robbery. Secondly, the marks on the victims' bodies indicated a blunt weapon with sharp edges. After the initial examination and assessment, a special task force was formed to quickly solve the case. Less than an hour after the information about the 3 people murdered in a quiet house in the middle of the night was discovered, the news spread like wildfire. Soon, the small town of Willow Creek was engulfed by curious onlookers flocking to the crime scene. Much false information about the case was fabricated by imaginative individuals and spread to many neighboring counties. The victims were the Coleman family, who had just moved from a Midwest state. Both husband and wife were retired civil servants from a New York television station, and their daughter was teaching in Seattle. Although new to the area, the entire family lived harmoniously and had no conflicts with their neighbors. The Coleman family's assets brought to Washington were not particularly valuable. So why were they so savagely murdered? Pressure from public opinion and directives from all levels of government intensified by the hour. But all information and evidence to identify the perpetrator remained a mystery. After conducting various investigative activities at the scene, the sheriff's office determined this was a particularly serious case. Therefore, they mobilized forces such as the Criminal Investigation Department and other units to assign tasks. One team directly investigated at the scene, collected statements, identified the victims' identities and relationships, and conducted forensic examinations. The second team specialized in reviewing suspicious relationships, criminal elements, and drug offenders in the area to assess the likelihood of their involvement. On the 7th of February, 2004, just 24 hours after the crime occurred, a special task force was established, and the manhunt began. The task force involved many professional units, primarily experienced investigators and detectives from the Criminal Investigation Division of the Evergreen County Sheriff's Office. The scene examination was conducted very thoroughly and meticulously, lasting from the morning of the 6th of February, after receiving the report, until late afternoon on the 6th of February. From the scene examination and autopsy, there were traces left behind that provided a basis to determine that this was a murder for robbery, committed by 1 or 2 perpetrators. Firstly, in the old house of Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, there were signs of forced entry and ransacking of wooden cabinets and tables, with signs of disturbance in small drawers within a large wooden cabinet located in the middle of the old house. That drawer was quite small and hidden within the large cabinet, requiring careful attention to discover. The intruders took jewelry. A big question now arose. The main crime scene was the victim's old house, and the new house in front was under construction. Therefore, a group of workers came to work every day, from morning until 5 p.m. Thus, to access the victims, the perpetrator must have been familiar with the terrain. He acted brutally with a sharp object. The The perpetrator's method of operation showed a determination to take the victims' lives. The investigative agency determined that the victims died due to being attacked by a weapon. Specifically, there were marks on the victims' bodies, similar to a crowbar or a similar hard object, striking multiple times, leading to death. The scene was very disturbed. Upon checking the assets in the victim's house, no valuable assets were found missing. Through reviewing the victims' relationships, it was determined that the victims' assets likely consisted of only a small amount of cash and some personal jewelry. Given the serious nature of the case, the Evergreen County Sheriff's Office leadership instructed various specialized departments to quickly investigate and apprehend the perpetrator, to promptly reassure the public and stabilize public order. Rigorous operational measures were applied to quickly identify the culprit and close the case. Reviewing the victims' relationships, investigators determined that Mr. Arthur Coleman, 61, former director of the Information and Advertising Center of a New York television station, and his wife, Mrs. Martha Coleman, moved to the southern states after retirement. Their daughter, Miss Sarah Coleman, born 1976, had also just moved to Seattle to teach. Although new to the area, the entire family lived harmoniously and had no conflicts with their neighbors. Before Thanksgiving 2003, the couple decided to build a house at 22 Willow Bend Street, Maplewood neighborhood, Willow Creek Town, Evergreen County, Washington State for rent. During the construction process, Mr. and Mrs. Coleman did not have any conflicts with the contractors or the workers involved in repairing the house. Their daughter, Miss Sarah Coleman, born 1976, also had no conflicts with colleagues at her teaching workplace. Thus, from the outset, the Special Task Force faced many difficulties as the incident occurred at night with no witnesses at the scene. Only the victim's blood was present, with no other traces to identify the suspect. The constant question for the task force was what kind of person was the perpetrator who caused the tragic deaths of all three family members? Was it solely for robbery that the perpetrator acted so brutally? The Coleman family was building a new house in the front, while staying in the old house in the back. At that time, it was suspected that the perpetrator was robbing a large sum of money. During the investigation, many individuals in the area, from drug offenders to criminals, were questioned. A large-scale sweep of over 300 individuals with criminal records, prior offenses, or drug addiction was conducted. Hundreds of officers were deployed, and hundreds of tips were received from the public. However, the perpetrator's trail remained elusive. Clues only gradually emerged when David Coleman, 33, Mr. and Mrs. Coleman's son, flew to Washington to arrange the funeral for the deceased. After checking the assets in the house, David confirmed that among the missing items were a DVD player and a Transcon brand amplifier, both imported from overseas, and his Priston brand bicycle, a rare item not commonly sold in the market. Mr. Coleman had brought all these items from New York. This information opened a crucial lead, helping the investigators identify a target for tracking the missing rare items. According to David Coleman's statement, after the incident, he flew from New York. One piece of information that caught the task force's attention was that Mr. Coleman's house. Since Mr. and Mrs. Coleman were very meticulous and demanding about construction, had employed a total of 3 different construction teams. Although the house was only structurally complete and not yet furnished, there were 3 different construction teams. Therefore, the task force requested that the investigation teams simultaneously scrutinize criminal elements, drug offenders, and unsavory individuals in the local area, while also thoroughly checking and verifying the identities and work schedules of these 3 construction teams by all means. The narrowing down of suspects for verification also yielded promising results. Through interviews with the construction team currently working on Mr. Coleman's house, they reported that their tools, including a crowbar, a hammer, and a tile cutter, were stolen. The first 2 items largely matched the traces found at the crime scene, suggesting they could have been the very weapons used by the culprit. This discovery largely aligned with the task force's initial assessment. The perpetrator was likely someone familiar with the victims, or at least knew the Coleman family's daily routines. Therefore, it was possible that the culprits were among the construction workers. After many days of investigation and reconnaissance, we re-examined all relevant individuals. Within the group of people who had visited the house, We identified one person from the construction team who had previously worked at the house for about 5 days, then left without leaving any further information. Through searching for construction workers, we obtained information and the background of a person named Michael Thorne. This individual, from Vermont, had previously worked as a construction helper at this house for about 5 days before quitting. Suspiciously, on the 7th of February, one day after the crime, Thorne suddenly bought a train ticket to return home despite not having received his pay. Additionally, a witness provided information to detectives. They saw a young man resembling Thorne riding a bicycle with something square-shaped behind him, resembling the stolen DVD player. Recognizing him as the prime suspect in the case, the task force immediately planned with various operational units to coordinate the manhunt. This individual lived with a girlfriend in a rental house in Maplewood. Further investigation revealed that on the 7th of February, this individual had no stable employment. According to his girlfriend's statements, he worked as a construction helper, but due to difficult work and low pay, he wanted to quit and was looking for another job. However, it was during the holiday season, so there was no work. After the holidays, on the day of the Lunar New Year's full moon, one day after the full moon, this individual had money to go home and also carried a heavy suitcase filled with belongings and valuables. With this information, the task force identified Thorne as the prime suspect. Immediately, a team of detectives went to Michael Thorne's home in Essex County, Vermont. There, in coordination with local police, detectives secretly observed from outside, looking for any machinery resembling the stolen items from the crime scene in Willow Creek, Washington. Inside the suspect's home, besides his living quarters, there were items related to the Washington case, namely the amplifier and DVD player. Detectives found that the amplifier and DVD player in Michael Thorne's house perfectly matched the description of the stolen items from the crime scene, from color and brand to the wear and tear on the knobs. With this conclusive evidence, an arrest warrant for Thorne was immediately issued. To ensure Thorne's safe arrest and prevent any desperate actions that could endanger nearby residents, the task force, after learning about suspect Thorne's habits, planned to apprehend Michael Thorne when he left his house. The opportunity arose when Thorne went to a secluded coffee shop for a drink. Immediately after his arrest, Michael Thorne was swiftly transported back to Washington State by air to facilitate the investigation at the Washington State Police Department. Thorne confessed that previously, during the 5 days he worked as a construction helper at Mr. Coleman's house, Thorne believed this family kept a lot of money. Mr. Coleman's family also had few people, so Thorne planned to rob them. At this time, the investigation department was still meeting to deploy duties to secure the full moon festival. When they heard the information that the suspect had been arrested and admitted the crime, it must be said that the officers applauded, almost crying with joy. There was even a commanding officer who, after many sleepless nights, was deeply moved by this news. On the day Michael Thorne was brought to the crime scene for reenactment, not only residents of Willow Creek, but also people from Seattle and Portland flocked to the house where the Coleman family had perished. Everyone wanted to see the cold-blooded murderer and his unforgivable actions with their own eyes. Thorne also reenacted the entire process of his criminal act. After more than a week of preparation, at around 8 p.m. on the 5th of February, he sneaked back to Mr. Coleman's house and hid in the newly built house. At this time, Sarah Coleman had just returned from work, so Mr. Arthur opened the door to greet his daughter. Fearing discovery, Thorne found a crowbar, sneaked up from behind, struck Mr. Arthur, causing him to collapse, then quickly entered the house. Seeing Mrs. Martha sitting on a chair, Thorne repeatedly struck her head with the crowbar, killing her instantly. Hearing the commotion, Sarah stepped out from inside, witnessed the horrifying scene, and fled. But Thorne cornered her in the bathroom and murdered her. After committing the murders, Thorne carried Mr. Arthur's body up the stairs, cut the phone line, and turned on the nightlight to mislead everyone. Immediately after, Thorne rummaged for money and jewelry, then used a bicycle to transport the amplifier and DVD player to hide them near his rental house. The next morning, Thorne sold the bicycle and bought a train ticket to his hometown. 20 years ago, on the full moon night of August 2003, the moon shone brightly in the sky. In the narrow alleys of Old Mill Road, Riverwood Town, Greenville County, Maine. Colorful lanterns were lit. Children eagerly prepared to carry lanterns, excited by the rhythm of drums urging them on in the village square. Young couples in love also strolled together. No one noticed a dark shadow at the foot of the mountain, still watching a young couple. The girl's frantic scream alerted the villagers to a horrifying murder. The young man and woman murdered were James Foster, born 1977, and Emily Hayes, born 1984, both from Riverwood Town, Greenville County, Maine. About 20 years ago, this area was very sparsely populated, being near a church, so there were few residents living right next to it. When James and Emily, along with residents and the victim's family, heard the screams, it was too late. On the night of the 12th of August, 2003, after receiving reports of the particularly serious murder in Riverwood Town, the Maine State Police arrived at the scene and conducted forensic examination. The murder scene was right in front of St. Jude Church, and around the area where the victims were found, there were many bloodstains. The autopsy of victim Emily Hayes showed multiple deep wounds on her body caused by a sharp object, resembling stab and slash wounds. About 6 meters from Emily Hayes' position was the victim James Foster, Emily's boyfriend. James also suffered multiple deep wounds from a sharp object, similar to knife wounds. The wounds on Emily's and James's bodies were quite similar, caused by a single weapon. From this evidence, it could be determined that the perpetrator was one person using a single weapon to attack the victims. No weapon was found around the scene. Based on the examination results, Emily had 5 stab wounds, with the primary injuries in her right chest area, penetrating through her lung and the left lobe of her liver, leading to significant blood loss. As for the male victim, he had 11 stab wounds on his body, primarily in his left chest area, penetrating through his lung and heart, causing massive blood loss. The crime occurred late at night with no witnesses. Expanding the search to the mountain area behind the church, investigators found a shoe with red stains inside, resembling blood stains. And importantly, this shoe did not belong to Emily or James. When the incident happened around 2-3 a.m., everyone was asleep. The person who discovered it was Emily's brother, who was waiting for her to come home. He heard a frantic scream at the church gate and ran out, seeing a shadow of a person running through the church and across the churchyard to the other side. Investigators determined that the shoe could belong to the perpetrator, who dropped it while fleeing. Beginning the search based on information provided by residents and the location where the shoe was left, it was determined that the perpetrator was hiding on the mountain behind the church. State police tactical units and canine dogs immediately set out for the mountain area behind the church to pursue the culprit. Due to the complex terrain, with many treacherous nooks and crannies on the mountain, the tactical police and canine dogs searched all night but yielded no results, finding no suspicious traces. The perpetrator remained at large. It was determined that the suspect could not carry the knife if seen by residents, as it would arouse suspicion. Therefore, the perpetrator likely discarded the knife around the crime scene or somewhere during the escape. Investigators expanded their search for the culprit and the weapon to nearby hill areas. With the involvement of multiple pursuit teams and the help of local residents, detectives finally found a knife. This knife still had dark red stains resembling dried blood. A self-made knife with very distinctive features was found. Its wooden handle was intricately crafted, and it was discarded in a cassava field on the hilltop, about 300 meters from the church by air. If by road, it would be almost a kilometer away. Miss Maria Hayes, the sister of victim Emily Hayes, provided crucial information about the shoe left near the scene. She identified the owner of the shoe and confirmed it belonged to a young man named Kyle, who was also a neighbor of Emily and James. That shoe belongs to Kyle, definitely Kyle, no one else's. I know he always wore that shoe. That night, he was playing checkers at my uncle's house, and I stood here and saw him bent down by the straw pile at my uncle's house. At that time, my sister was in 8th or 9th grade, and she was on the city's soccer team. This Kyle guy always liked her, but my sister said no. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't going to take him. So he said he asked 4 people, and no one would take him, and he only liked Emily. So Emily said, "You and I can't be together because I think our ages aren't quite compatible." My sister didn't like him either. That day, friends invited her out, and after soccer practice, he forbade her to go. He blocked her way and held her back. So my sister turned back, went to hang out with friends, and he had already prepared. He was stalking. If she didn't take him, he would kill her. He had threatened her before. The person named Kyle that everyone spoke of. Full name, Kyle Henderson, born 1978, from Old Mill Road, Riverwood Town, Greenville County, Maine. To determine if that shoe belonged to Kyle Henderson, investigators conducted a scent analysis by collecting scent samples from a flip-flop and a shirt belonging to Kyle Henderson taken from his home, comparing them with scent samples collected from the shoe left at the crime scene. The results showed that the scent from the flip-flop matched the scent from the shoe at the scene. The scent from the shirt also matched the scent from the shoe at the scene. This meant that the shoe left at the crime scene was indeed Kyle Henderson's. Further analysis of the blood sample collected from the shoe, compared with blood samples from James and Emily, showed that the blood was not from either victim. DNA testing of Miss Susan Henderson, Kyle Henderson's birth mother, compared with the DNA sample obtained from the blood stain in the shoe at the scene, concluded that these two DNA samples were related by blood. Thus, the investigative agency had sufficient evidence to determine that the shoe left at the scene belonged to Kyle Henderson. The bloodstain in the shoe was Kyle Henderson's, and the perpetrator of the horrifying crime in front of St. Jude Church, Riverwood Town, Greenville County, Maine, was indeed Kyle Henderson. The investigative agency issued an emergency arrest warrant for Kyle based on these findings. However, when the emergency arrest warrant was executed, the suspect, Kyle, had fled. Through public outreach and informant reports, it was determined that Kyle had fled to Canada, which significantly impacted the investigation and resolution of the case. However, after the murder occurred, no one knew where Kyle had gone. A person living in the mountainous area bordering Maine and New Brunswick, Canada, reported seeing someone come to their house, asking for water and food, barefoot, wearing shorts and a tank top, with disheveled hair and bloody hands, but the suspect then left. Since Kyle Henderson frequently crossed the US-Canada border for trade, he was experienced and had escaped from the United States. We reported to the Department of Homeland Security, DHS, and DHS instructed Interpol to communicate with Canada. We also sent a formal request to the New Brunswick Provincial Police to ask their liaison officer in the city of Moncton to communicate with their counterparts to track down Kyle's whereabouts. We also requested and emphasized that all possible communication with Canada would be through their cooperation. Since the case occurred, multiple generations of officers and personnel from the Maine State Police have invested efforts to find Kyle, but without success. At the time of the crime, Kyle had not yet obtained a social security card in the local area. He also had no prior criminal record, so there were no fingerprints or mugshots, making the search for Kyle like looking for a needle in a haystack. In mid-January 2020, the Maine State Police received information. Kyle Henderson had returned to the United States. Kyle dared not return home, only wandering in the mountain area near his house, then left for the southern states without knowing which one. After 17 years, when Kyle returned, it was a time when some large areas had social welfare centers that took in homeless, destitute, and begging individuals. We focused on that population because we determined that when Kyle returned, he had no stable profession and did not return to his hometown. He was a transient, so we focused there. We coordinated a search. During the Lunar New Year of the Metal Rat in 2020, the Criminal Investigation Division of the Maine State Police received information from a social welfare center in Florida, reporting the discovery of a suspicious person named Michael Roberts, who had been admitted to the center not long ago. Upon receiving the report, a task force immediately set out for Florida. Upon arriving at the Florida State Social Welfare Center, the first task of the task force was to determine if the man suspected to be Kyle was indeed Kyle Henderson, the culprit of the case 17 years ago. Posing as homeless individuals living with them, the detectives tried to approach the suspect. Gradually, the relationship became closer. The suspect began to share that his name was Kyle Henderson from Riverwood, Maine, and absolutely did not mention the old case. At this point, for a very long time, the suspect did not use a normal voice, but his voice was very distorted, or he did not speak much, and his voice was very difficult to understand. Compared to Kyle's previous appearance, he had changed a lot. Therefore, identifying the individual and confirming if it was truly him was a long process. The only way to confirm if it was Kyle was through DNA testing, to have a basis to confirm that the suspect was indeed Kyle Henderson. Detectives coordinated with officials from the Florida State Social Welfare Center to offer free haircuts to those in the center, then secretly took a hair sample from Kyle and sent it for DNA testing. The DNA test results showed that the DNA sample from the man named Kyle was related by blood to Miss Susan Henderson, Kyle Henderson's birth mother. With these test results, the investigative agency had a basis to confirm that the man's full name was Kyle Henderson. He was indeed the perpetrator of the horrifying crime in front of St. Jude Church, Riverwood Town, Greenville County, Maine, 17 years ago. On the 26th of January, the Criminal Investigation Department of the Maine State Police issued a decision to prosecute the case, prosecute the defendant, and execute the arrest warrant for Kyle Henderson for the act of murder. Kyle Henderson confessed that back then he loved Emily Hayes, but Emily did not agree because their ages were not compatible, and Emily loved James, which caused Kyle to become consumed with jealousy and hatred day and night. At that time, I went to a fortune teller, not drawing lots at the church. 2 of us drew. I drew. 2 of us were compatible, like a boat going up a waterfall, a wicker boat. So it wasn't compatible. So she got involved with someone else. So the card said no, because she didn't reciprocate my feelings. Kyle was bitter and planned to murder Emily and then commit suicide so they could be together forever. In August 2003, Kyle went to his uncle's village, a market specializing in forging knives for sale. He ordered a knife according to his plan. After a period of stalking Emily, on the night of the 12th of August, 2003, exactly on the mid-autumn full moon night, Kyle saw Emily walking with James near the St. Jude Church. His jealousy intensified tenfold. He then attacked and murdered Emily and James. I panicked, my mind was blank. At that time, I didn't know anything. Like in a dream, I knew nothing. I was almost like a wild beast, frustrated by everything, just frantic. I couldn't explain. Explaining the blood in his shoe, Kyle confessed. During the struggle, Kyle accidentally stabbed himself in the leg, causing bleeding. Perhaps the blood fell into his shoe, and during his escape, the shoe came off. Due to the rugged mountainous terrain, Kyle easily escaped from the pursuit of the investigative agency. He went to a secluded place, sat down, and tried to commit suicide, but failed. I felt like I ran up there and lay flat. I lay dead. I tried to kill myself, but the first attempt failed. The second time I thought I was dead, so I threw the knife away. Then I lay there for a while and woke up. Then I crawled away, threw the knife, and then I didn't see it. I thought I was dead that day. Didn't know for sure. Thought I was dead, but I'm not. I threw it there. Then I crawled to the other side of the mountain. Then I circled back to the mountain near my aunt's house. That night, I slept there because the knife was too dull. I couldn't die quickly enough. After regaining consciousness, he continued to flee. If he carried the knife while walking, he would be suspected. To avoid detection, Kyle left the knife in a cassava field and continued to flee. But during the reenactment, Kyle showed us the location of the grave where he had previously attempted suicide and then discarded the knife. Through verification with local residents who had lived in the area for a long time, it was confirmed that the location Kyle pointed to was indeed an abandoned grave, and currently, only a small mound of earth remains. After murdering Emily and James, Kyle claimed he had inexplicable strength, and he ran through mountains, crossing several hills. He ran all night until morning, then wandered, begging for food along the way, and continued walking to Vermont, New York, and then he escaped across the border into Canada, living as a homeless beggar for many years. Kyle murdered my grandchild, and this year he has been on the run for 17 years, and the law enforcement agency has caught him, and now he has been sentenced to death. And before the trial opened, Kyle stood before the court and admitted that he accepted death, not life. But now I just hope that law enforcement and all public officials will execute Kyle Henderson as soon as possible to set an example for others. 17 years of hiding abroad upon his return. Although he disguised himself as a homeless beggar, Kyle Henderson could not escape the clutches of the law. The net of heaven is wide, though its meshes are coarse, it misses nothing. Somehow, Those who commit serious crimes, no matter how cunningly they hide and disguise themselves, will eventually be brought to light.